Hi guys, and happy new year to all of you. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas period and a very happy New Year's Eve. Today's video is, I think, a good topic for January, because in January a lot of people, make New Year's resolutions, and one of those New Year's resolutions for a lot of people tends to be either just getting to grips with their finances or maybe getting started investing. So I think it's a very topical video. And whilst generally this is aimed at beginners and people who haven't perhaps started investing yet, this can also be a reminder for those who are a little bit more experienced of things that they should remember perhaps. So these rules actually, whilst I agree with all of them, the script, if you will, for this comes from an article that is from the Telegraph. And whilst I have a subscription and a lot of people don't, I figured that it might be a good material, to share, but obviously I don't want to take credit when I didn't write it. But like I said, I agree with all of these rules and I really wanted to share them. So without further ado, let's kick off. So the first rule is to be in it for the long haul. I've repeated this many times, and generally investment needs to be seen as a long haul game. So if you aren't able to tie up the money for at least 5 years, then you shouldn't be investing it. Because whilst, for example, I got lucky and I took my money out before 5 years was up because I needed it for my house build, my purchasing land, whatever else, I was lucky that it was at a profit when I sold it, most of it at least, and overall in profit. So I didn't make losses. But if I was in a position where I really needed that money and the market happened to be at a loss, I wouldn't want to be having to withdraw that money at a loss. Do you know what I mean? So unless you are able to sort of withstand a period of a few years of market recovery, which happens often, so whilst the general trajectory of the market is up, that doesn't look like an upwards trajectory every year. It goes up some years, down some years, and just overall ends up going up. So essentially, if you are investing for a shorter period, you are taking a big risk. Number 2 is to set your goals at the outset. So before you start investing, you need to basically assess what you want to achieve out of investing. Why are you investing? How much can you afford to invest? What kind of losses you're willing to tolerate if it went badly? How long are you able to not have that money, etc., etc. So this is all really important to write down before you start investing, and come back to this as time goes on to remind yourself, perhaps so that you don't panic sell at a loss. You need to essentially prepare for the worst, because if you are prepared mentally and have written it down and you are aware that the worst could happen, you are less likely to sell in a panic. Now, obviously, no investment really is guaranteed. There are investments safer than others. So a loan company can absolutely go down, even if it's one that's been around for hundreds of years. But obviously an index fund like the S&P 500, which is the 500 biggest companies in America, the index changes with company changes. So that is very unlikely to suddenly basically collapse and you lose all your money. So having all of this figured out before you start is essentially a priority. And this leads really nicely into the third rule, which is accepting uncertainty. And this is something that, again, I've repeated many times in videos. Other people have repeated many times in their videos, and it's often a disclaimer when we work with brands and stuff like that. Past performance is not an indicator of future performance. So whilst we talk about markets always recovering and there being a small chance of index funds failing, things like that, things change, the economy changes. Just because America is a superpower at the moment doesn't mean they always will be. You need to accept that there is uncertainty and you need to figure out how you're going to deal with that. So is it that you're going to not only invest in the American stock market? Maybe you want to invest a little bit in like the BRICS countries or the UK markets or the European markets or whatever you think, but you need to be okay with uncertainty. Number 4, the holy grail of investing is diversify. Now, with this, there are 2 key tools that investors have that when they use together, they are almost certain to make you richer. The first, as mentioned before, is time. If you can invest over a really long period, preferably measured in decades, you are less likely to lose your money. But the second one, and this is what this whole rule is about, is diversifying. So essentially spreading your money across multiple investments. So like I mentioned about maybe not investing solely in the American stock market, you could also think about not solely investing in a specific genre. So for example, don't just invest in individual stocks, invest in ETFs, maybe a little bit of crypto, maybe a little bit of gold or silver or something like that. Don't just invest in healthcare, invest in consumer goods, energy, whatever else. Just do a lot of research and don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you invest all of your money into one company or one market, the chance that you are going to come out at a loss is much, much higher than if you diversify. So COVID, for example, was a good example of this, because whilst a lot of companies were seeing massive downfalls and investors were seeing massive downfalls in their shares, healthcare companies were shooting up. So if someone had diversified enough, their whole portfolio wouldn't have been as much at a loss as it would have been if they hadn't invested in healthcare. Hopefully that makes sense. Rule number 5 is to try and save on tax as much as you can. So obviously in the UK, we have things like ISAs. So ISAs and pensions are good ways to essentially shield some of your money from taxes. Now, as British residents, we can invest up to £20,000 a year currently into an ISA. This is both cash ISAs and stocks and shares ISAs. So basically any gains that you make, whether that's capital gains or whether that's dividends, that is shielded from tax. If you don't do this, as your money grows, you get more dividends, you get more capital gains, you'll have to pay tax on this. And recently, both the dividend allowance and the capital gains allowance were cut. So whereas previously you could make a lot more from the stock market before you had to pay any kind of tax, this is now decreased, and who's to say it won't decrease further. Whereas any money you put into an ISA is essentially forever protected. So make use of ISAs. Number 6 is quite an interesting one and a very true one, and it can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. So this is really true. You can make it really complicated and do lots of research for individual companies, invest in lots of individual companies, have to keep track of how they're performing. Do I need to sell this share now? Do I need to invest more in it? Is now a good time to invest more? But if you don't want to do all that, like some people enjoy that. And when I had my big portfolio previously, I really enjoyed that. When I'm investing this year, I'm going to be making 3 separate portfolios, one of which will be like that, 2 of which will not be. You can just invest in funds, essentially, and the funds do all the work for you. So you just need to choose the kind of things you want to invest in. And a lot of platforms help you do that. So just make sure you find the right platform for you. And whilst funds and ETFs are generally diversified already, you could diversify even further by having a few different ones. So for example, you could have the S&P 500, the FTSE 100, some kind of developing world one, which I think Vanguard has, and something else, and have like 4 different ones. So yeah, as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. Number 7 is costs matter, so pay attention to them. Now, whilst you are able to avoid tax by using ISAs, it is incredibly hard to invest without some form of costs. Now, there are many platforms which offer zero commission investing, but obviously those platforms still have to make money. If you're investing in a managed fund or something like that, they often take a percentage fee. If you are using a platform that's zero commission and you're investing in funds yourself, it's a lot cheaper because they don't take commission, because they don't manage the funds for you. But even the ETFs tend to have some sort of little fee built in which isn't like a fee you pay, it's just a fee that's taken off of the value of the ETF, if that makes any sense. So just pay attention to costs. I personally would not invest in managed funds anymore. I would, if you don't want to make your own decisions about investments, just go for ETFs and still go for a platform that takes zero commission. But obviously it's up to you. If you really want to invest in a managed fund, great, just look at the costs. Cheapest is not always best though, but just keep in mind that even something as 1%, something as small as 1%, can actually mean a big difference money-wise as your portfolio grows year on year. Number 8 is monitor progress, but don't obsess. Now, checking your portfolio every day is not a good idea. And a lot of beginner investors tend to do this. They tend to check every day. How is my portfolio doing? Am I still up? Am I down? Oh no, I'm down. What do I do? Don't do that. But do regularly keep in touch with your investments, and especially if you are choosing individual stocks, just keep watch of any sign that your investments are not performing and maybe it's time to switch them. Any news essentially on any individual stocks, is it something that's likely to impact very long term, or is it a short blip that they're going to come out of? All of this stuff, just keep in mind. But obviously, if you're investing in just ETFs and funds, then you probably don't need to track as much as if you're investing in individual shares. Number 9 is beware of fads. Every now and then, an investment fad takes hold. Now, if you've been around the finance world, the investment world for a while, and you're like dipping your toes in and only now thinking of investing, you probably know of, I don't know, different cryptos that have like come and gone, or, you know, they've shot up and suddenly just disappeared, or GameStop or anything like that. Be wary of anything that is talked about like it's the next big thing. The nature of human emotions and markets tends to drive these fads up to really unrealistic prices, but sooner or later they crash back down. And yes, whilst a lot of people made a lot of money on, I don't know, Dogecoin or GameStop because they got in at the right time, whilst the fad was still going, so many people lost money because they thought they were still getting in when they can, and then it crashed. So just be really careful of stuff like that. Number 10 is keeping quiet. Now, what this means isn't not telling anyone you're investing. This is something that, I mean, as a finance YouTuber, doesn't really apply to me, but as an individual, I mean, it applies to me, but it doesn't. You'll see what I mean. It's really difficult to admit to people that you've made a mistake. Oh no, I've invested in the wrong thing. I've lost money. I'm a bit more okay with that now because I'm open and I want you guys to see that it's not just a clear cut, everyone's perfect, and then if you make a bad investment, then oh my God, you're the worst. No, we're all human and you need to be prepared to make some bad decisions. So I'm kind of okay with it. Whilst it's not easy to do, I still do it. But if you tell your friends, oh my God, I've invested in this company and it's the next big thing and I'm going to be a millionaire, and then it fails, you're going to find it really hard to sell that investment or to talk about selling. So it's not about keeping quiet about investing at all. It's about keeping quiet about what investment decisions you're making. And finally, I've mentioned this on my channel before so many times, especially at the beginning, and this is really important. If you don't understand it, don't invest in it. So for anything that you invest in, you should understand essentially how that works, anything that might impact how it works, the risks of that investment, any news that might impact how it will work, how the economy will impact it, etc. So it's not about having like a complete understanding of everything about it, because that's impossible. And that will just lead to never diversifying, because you will stick yourself into one thing. So, oh, I understand healthcare, I'm only going to invest in healthcare companies. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, if you have absolutely zero idea how a certain economy, certain market, certain company works, then don't invest in it. So the Telegraph has put this in a really good way. So for example, this is not to say that you need to understand, for example, every detail of NVIDIA's advanced AI microchips, but you should know what the company sells, why customers buy its products, who the competitors are, this is really important, and what could change in the future. How will you know? Try explaining it to someone else. Now, this works for not just investments, for anything. This is how I used to check in school whether I understood something. It's the best way to learn is to explain it to someone else. And if you can't, then you don't know it. Okay, I've been talking for a long time. I've been recording for 20 minutes. Let's see if I can get this video a little bit down because I don't want to post a 20-minute video. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck if you're starting your investment journey, and see you in the next video. Bye.